Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube series. We are in 1915 today, so we have a diary entry. Recap, the previous video was continuing on with the Young Russia speech of 1936, and one of the more interesting things in that section of the speech is that Dmitri mentioned a specific accusation by opponents of the Young Russia Party that the party had accepted money from the Kremlin. Excuse me just a minute, my dog is up to something. Nope, I guess not. Okay. Yeah, and he said, what did he say? I don't consider it necessary to respond to such criticism. So, you know, kind of a non-denial denial, maybe. Although I have my doubts about the group actually getting funding from the Kremlin. I think that would have been too much for Dmitri. And Kazanbek might have received some that he didn't tell the rest of the members of the party about. Anyway, speculation. In 1915, we had this sort of dull visit from Felix Yusupov, and Dmitri still recuperating, as he is in today's diary entry. Our cast today, we have Paul and Bodya. Paul is being a very good father these days and coming and visiting his son every day. And we have Nikashidze, the Georgian, who had invited Dmitri to the big party that he went to the night before his surgery with actresses and opera singers and so on. And Sandro of Leuchtenberg is back, and of course Maria is there. All right, so we are up to the 11th / the 24th of February in Petrograd at Nevsky 41. It's 1 degree above freezing and dark and overcast, so gloomy, the kind of weather that Dmitri just hated. Okay, here we go. I slept well, only now, as luck would have it, I've got a terribly painful toothache. In the morning, though I coughed a bit, there was very little blood. Papa came around 11 o'clock. He was in an excellent mood. We talked about the recent defeat of the 10th Army. Papa said that Yapanchin's 20th Corps was almost entirely captured. Astonishing. Then we lunched à trois. Papa touched on the question of the bombing of the Dardanelles. He said that the Anglo-French fleets were taking them for us. We sat around and discussed it until 2 o'clock when Papa left. Bodya came. We sat around until 3 o'clock, then I read. Nikashidze came around 5 o'clock. Maria really liked him, and he does seem to be the nicest fellow. Then Sandro Leuchtenberg came and stayed until 7 o'clock. It was quite nice. Apparently, he's buzzing around Maria, i.e. he likes her. Maria and I dined à deux at 8 o'clock. Then she played the piano. At 11:30, we had tea. Then both of us went to bed. Okay. So a nice day overall. Now, when he says that he and Papa had lunch à trois, obviously there's another person, a third person, and that would have been Maria, because we're told that Bodya came a little later, as Paul was leaving, in fact. All right, there was something else that I wanted to highlight, but now I don't know what it was. Okay. Yeah, Dimitri's teeth, always problematic. You know, the poor fellow. I can sympathize. I have an autoimmune disease that attacks the salivary glands, the saliva glands, and it's just disastrous for a person's teeth. And for Dmitri, yeah, I don't know what the specific problem was, but from the time he was a little guy, he was going off to the dentist, and then all throughout his travels trying to get to England at the end of the First World War. He had to stop here and there and go to the dentist. Then when he was in London, going to the dentist and getting false teeth, not completely, but he was ashamed of it. He was 26, and he said, "Here I am, 26, and I'm getting partial dentures." And then I think by the time he was at Schatzalp, he had full dentures, but he wasn't out of the woods because his gums then got very, very inflamed and painful, and he had to go back to the dentist because of that. My poor little dog, as you know, has this bad cough. And another question that comes up, he talks about he's coughing a bit this morning, but not bringing up any blood. And I think, this makes me think of the famous comment that Brasova made that has convinced people that Dmitri already had tuberculosis in 1915. And she said, they were at lunch together or something, and he was coughing, and she noticed there was blood on his handkerchief. And of course, that does sound like tuberculosis, but it's not something that was specific to tuberculosis. I mean, again, I used to occasionally cough of blood when I was a young person. I had chronic pleurisy, and it resolved. I don't have it anymore. And in Dmitri's case, the reason I brought this up was that I was specifically thinking that this event, this meeting with Brasova, he will be meeting with Brasova in just a few days' time, in February. And I wonder if the blood she saw, the coughing she saw, was from this sinus operation and this throat operation. She said he just laughed it off. And, he would have. Anyway, okay. That's my theory about that. So Paul is in a good mood, Dmitri tells us, and very, very much into talking about the war. And Dmitri has definitely been following it. He hasn't, put anything about that in his diaries, and he doesn't seem to be terribly well informed, unlike during the Second World War when he would be. So Paul is filling him in. So there's, specifically, there's this German operation in East Prussia in a town that I think was called Augustov, I don't know, 10th Army, and they were defeated, and it was a very bloody, very, very bloody defeat for the Russian army. Then Yapanchin was I don't know why Dmitri says the 20th. He's really kind of muddle-headed. It was actually the 3rd Army Corps, I believe, in Augustov, and yeah, Yapanchin surrendered that corps, and it was a lot of the troops were taken captive, and so Yapanchin was then discharged, shall we say. He wasn't one of the captives, and he ended up being sent back to the reserve. I guess they couldn't really afford to discard entirely someone with his experience, even though they didn't like that decision he'd made. I'm being a bit tentative about this because I didn't do the research myself. I relied on the notes of Alexandra and Natasha today when I was doing the translation, so I could have got things wrong. And then there is this reference to the Dardanelles. It'd been a Russian dream to take the Dardanelles going back to at least the time of Catherine the Great. And in fact, Catherine the Great had named her second oldest grandson Constantine. She chose his name rather than his parents, and she hired Greek tutors for him because her dream was that Russia would take the Dardanelles, and they would form a new Byzantium, get rid of the Ottoman Empire somehow, I guess, and they would start a new Byzantium, and that Constantine would be the king or the emperor of Byzantium. And yeah, so Dmitri himself in 1917 and 1918, one of the hardest things for him, oddly enough, well, maybe not oddly, given that this was so much a Russian dream, was that they lost the Dardanelles. But this idea that he has that the Allies are going to take it, they're taking them for us. That's a quote. I think that's wishful thinking. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't think that the Allies planned to take the Dardanelles and just hand them over to Russia. Maybe that was a part of the alliance agreement. But it didn't work out anyway. And the main operations in the Dardanelles would start in April. And Churchill, of course, would be very much involved in that. It would more or less be his decision. And so the disastrous Battle of Gallipoli, he'd be blamed for that. And it would almost ruin his career. Anyway, I won't go into all of that, though it's a fascinating story. So after Paul leaves, Bodya comes, sounds like for about an hour. He and Dmitri seem to be close, at this particular time. And Natasha and Alexandra told me that they have a letter that Dmitri wrote to Bodya. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Now Nikashidze comes. As I said, Dmitri had gone to the party at his place, but he doesn't seem to know him well. It seems to have been a recent acquaintance. So he comes over. What does he come over for? Not lunch. Tea. Yeah, 5 o'clock tea. And he makes a very good impression on Maria and on Dmitri, who says he seems to be the nicest fellow. So Maria, I'm always getting into trouble because I skim things before I do sit down and really read them and do the translation. And so yesterday, I think I mentioned that in this diary entry, there would be people buzzing around Maria, and instead of there being two, there's only one. So yeah, Maria really likes him. Well, I don't think that necessarily means anything. Dmitri really likes him too. He made a good impression on them. So I was, wrong about that. Anyway, the one who is buzzing around is Sandro Sandro Leuchtenberg, I should say. He stays until 7 o'clock. He leaves just before dinner time. And Dmitri gets the impression that he likes Maria, likes Maria, and is kind of buzzing around her. How Maria felt, Dmitri doesn't tell us, or if she was aware of this. She would end up getting married in 1917, and Sandro would end up getting married in 1917, and not to each other, as you know. So it didn't go anywhere, but it'd be interesting to know if how Maria felt about it. And I think, Dimitri's not saying anything disparaging about that. He probably would have liked his sister to have married, kind of his bestie, kind of, at that time. Okay, so then he and she have dinner together at 8 o'clock, and she played the piano. So a nice evening. I think, they really enjoyed each other's company. She was obviously staying there. I was somewhat confused about that, whether she was living at the Sergei Palace or not, but she clearly was, because they had tea at 11:30, and then both of them went off to their rooms and went to bed. So yeah, that's obvious. Anyway, what do we have next time? Well, Sandro's sister, Alexander of Leuchtenberg's sister, is going to turn up. I didn't even know he had a sister, and she's going to bring some news about Grand Duke Konstantin Konstantinovich. All right, the tooth problem is going to escalate. And yeah, Maria will be departing, and we'll find out where it is that she's going. Okay, in 1936, so the next video will have the end of the Young Russia speech and some very harsh words. Dmitri is saving the worst for last, in the sense of, really being angry and expressing things quite harshly. All right, so hope to see you for both of those. Bye.